The cold wind howled across the rocky surface of the distant planet, slicing through the thin layers of Ryan's insulated jacket. He stood at the edge of his small outpost, staring at the horizon where the jagged cliffs met the dim glow of the twin suns. Life on this outer colony was harsh and unforgiving. Most people had left years ago, unwilling to endure the relentless storms and scarce resources. Ryan had stayed. He had chosen isolation, comfort in silence, and the simplicity of relying only on himself. He was returning from a routine patrol, scanning the perimeter for unusual activity when something caught his eye. A faint trail of smoke rose against the orange sky. At first, he thought it was one of the planet's natural geysers, but its movement was irregular, unnatural. His heart quickened as he grabbed his scanner. The device beeped furiously, detecting metal fragments scattered across a wide area. Someone or something had crashed nearby. Ryan's curiosity outweighed caution. He activated his hoverbike and sped toward the source. The wind buffeted him, but he held firm, guiding the craft through narrow canyons and over frozen ridges. When he arrived, the sight made him stop in disbelief. A small spacecraft, sleek and silver, lay twisted and shattered among the rocks. Smoke curled from the broken engine, and faint, flickering lights suggested life or at least recent life. He approached carefully, scanning for heat signatures. There were two. One was faint, shallow. The other was stronger, but wary. Ryan crouched behind a boulder and studied the figures. One was small and human-like, but the skin shimmered with an unnatural hue, almost metallic in the dim light. Its movements were sharp, precise, almost predatory. Ryan had read about this species. In intergalactic reports, their warriors were feared across multiple systems. Most humans never encountered them alive, and those who did rarely survived unscathed. The second figure was slumped closer to the ship, wounded and trembling. Ryan's chest tightened. He recognized the telltale signs of someone who needed help, someone alive, scared, and desperate. His instincts told him to retreat. Most people would have left. Most people would have locked their doors and pretended this never happened. But Ryan was not most people. Come on, he whispered to himself, gripping the emergency kit on his belt. He approached slowly, hands raised to show no immediate threat. The smaller, stronger alien noticed him instantly. Its eyes, sharp and calculating, followed his every step. It didn't move toward him, but its posture radiated danger. Ryan could feel it like a live wire, ready to strike at the slightest provocation. "I'm not here to hurt you," Ryan said softly, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "I just want to help." For a long moment, there was only silence. The alien's head tilted slightly, studying him, analyzing him, trying to guess his intentions. Ryan could almost hear the thoughts passing through its mind. Is this human brave or foolish? Will it die or survive? Can it be trusted? Then, the smaller alien shifted slightly and turned away. Focusing on the injured figure, Ryan crouched and moved closer to the wounded one. It was a young female of the same species, her body thin but muscular, her skin glowing faintly under the dim sunlight. Cuts and bruises streaked her arms and face, and she shivered violently. From pain or fear, he could not tell which. Ryan dropped to one knee and examined her carefully. "You're hurt, but I can help," he said. He produced a compact med kit and quickly cleaned the worst of her wounds, applying a healing gel that soothed the burning cuts. She flinched at first, but she didn't resist. Her eyes flicked up to him once, a mixture of caution and gratitude, before she looked away again. The larger alien, the one who had watched him from the rocks, made a low, almost imperceptible growl. It was not aggression exactly, more like a warning: do not make a mistake. Ryan felt the tension, but did not falter. He knew this creature could crush him in seconds if it chose to, yet he stayed calm. That was his advantage. Humans were unpredictable, and sometimes courage could be more disarming than any weapon. By the time the sun dipped behind the cliffs, painting the landscape in shades of violet and orange, the injured alien was resting against the wall of Ryan's cabin, wrapped in a thick thermal blanket. He had guided her inside carefully, keeping the other alien outside. Every sound, every movement was measured, controlled. He sensed that the larger alien was still evaluating him, watching for signs of weakness. "You're not like the others," the alien finally said, its voice low and harsh, but fluent in the common galactic tongue. Most humans would have fled or closed their doors. Ryan shrugged, trying to keep his tone casual. "I don't like leaving people to die. Doesn't matter the species." The alien's eyes narrowed. It said nothing, but Ryan could feel its mind turning over every word, testing his sincerity. The silence stretched, thick with tension, until finally it moved back into the shadows, leaving Ryan alone with the wounded female. Her name, he learned, was Lyra. She spoke slowly, choosing her words carefully. Her voice was melodic but carried a hard edge, the tone of someone who had been trained to command and fight since childhood. Ryan noticed her sharp gaze, her constant alertness, the way she measured every object in the room. She was dangerous, he realized, not just physically but mentally. She was calculating and strong-willed. Yet, beneath that, he sensed fear, exhaustion, and confusion. "Why did they attack you?" Ryan asked gently, handing her a water pack. "Who were they?" Lyra hesitated, eyes flicking to the door, then back to him. "They're my people. They think I betrayed them. I did not, but they do not understand." Ryan nodded, keeping his expression neutral. He did not fully understand her world, but he understood betrayal, he understood fear, and he understood survival. "You're safe here for now. I won't let them take you." She studied him for a long time, the glow in her eyes dimming slightly as if she were testing his honesty. Finally, she nodded, almost imperceptibly. It was the first sign of trust. Night fell, and the cabin became quiet except for the crackling of the small heater. Ryan kept watch, listening to the wind and the faint groans of the planet. Lyra rested, but not fully. She remained alert, every muscle tense, ready for a sudden attack. Ryan respected that. He did not force conversation. He allowed her space, knowing that trust could not be demanded, only earned. Hours passed, and Ryan reflected on the situation. Most humans would never have helped someone like Lyra. Most would have seen her as a threat and locked the door. But fear had never been his guide. He thought of his past, of losing family, of surviving impossible odds, of learning that courage often meant doing what others would not. Helping her was the right choice. It was human to act with courage, to act with honor. As dawn approached, Lyra stirred. She watched him quietly as he packed supplies for the day. Ryan noticed her curiosity, small gestures that revealed her growing awareness of his capabilities. She might be dangerous, yes, but she was also alive and vulnerable. And she had no reason to trust him, yet she did, in the smallest way. That mattered more than anything. "I should leave," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "They will come for me again. I cannot stay here long." Ryan shook his head. "Not until you're strong enough to move. You need time to recover. And I won't send you out into danger while you're hurt." Her eyes searched his face, a mixture of surprise and suspicion. "You do not fear me," Ryan smiled faintly. "Fear doesn't help, courage does." For the first time, Lyra's lips curved into something like a smile. It was fleeting, almost imperceptible. But Ryan noticed. In that moment, he realized that the bond between them, however tentative, had begun. It was fragile, like ice on a frozen river, but strong enough to carry them through the dangers ahead. The twin suns rose higher, casting light across the frozen canyon. Ryan and Lyra sat in the quiet cabin, preparing for the challenges to come. Outside, the wind still howled, the alien world remained hostile, and danger lurked beyond every ridge. But inside the cabin, two beings from entirely different worlds had begun to trust one another, and that trust would become their greatest weapon. Ryan had not closed his door. He had opened it, and that simple act of courage, simple as it seemed, would change the course of both their lives forever. The cold morning air stung Ryan's face as he and Lyra stepped outside the cabin. The twin suns were still low, casting long shadows across the jagged terrain. The planet's wind howled through the narrow canyon, carrying the faint scent of metal and frost. Ryan adjusted his jacket and checked the supplies he had packed. "We need to move," he said, his voice steady, Staying in one place makes it easier for them to find you. Lyra's eyes scanned the horizon, sharp and alert. I can fight, she said quietly. I did not need hiding. Ryan shook his head. Not yet, you're still weak from the crash. And there are more of them out there than you realize. We move carefully, or we die. She studied him for a moment, then nodded, though she carried the air of a warrior. Her trust in him was growing. She followed his lead, stepping lightly across the frozen ground, her movements fluid and precise. Ryan admired her agility and strength, but he kept his focus sharp. Survival required more than strength, it required strategy. They traveled cautiously, toward the rocky hills where Ryan knew they could find natural shelter. The canyon walls provided some cover, but he stayed alert, scanning the terrain for signs of movement. Lyra moved beside him silently, her eyes constantly scanning, her senses heightened. It was clear she had been trained to survive, to fight, to anticipate danger. Yet today, she was learning that humans could be clever to dot as they neared a narrow pass. Ryan held up a hand. Stop, he whispered. He crouched behind a boulder and scanned the area. There, moving cautiously through the frost, were the mercenaries who had attacked her. They were heavily armed, their weapons glinting in the dim sunlight. Ryan counted 4. But he suspected there were more nearby, hidden from sight. Lyra's hand instinctively went to her weapon, a sleek energy blade strapped to her back. I can take them, she said, her tone confident. Ryan shook his head again. Not all of them, not together. We need a plan. He moved quickly, pointing to a narrow ledge above the pass. We go up there. From height, we can see them. And we can set traps, use the rocks, the terrain, make them regret chasing us. Lyra followed silently, impressed despite herself. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but Ryan's mind worked like a weapon. He observed, calculated, and adapted. She realized that his courage was matched by intelligence, a combination that could be deadly. Once on the ledge, Ryan quickly gathered loose rocks, frozen branches, and a few devices from his kit. He set them carefully along the pass, creating simple but effective traps. He taught Lyra to do the same, explaining timing and positioning. Though she was a trained warrior, she had never fought in such unfamiliar conditions. The human approach fascinated her, using patience and cleverness, instead of relying solely on brute strength. The mercenaries entered the pass slowly, cautious. Ryan signaled to Lyra, and they waited. Then, with a sudden movement, rocks tumbled down. Narrowly missing the intruders, alarms went off. The first mercenary shouted. But the confusion worked in Ryan and Lyra's favor. Lyra leapt into action, her movements lightning fast. She struck with precision, disarming 2 of the attackers in seconds. Ryan used a combination of tools and improvised weapons to block the remaining ones. The battle was tense but controlled. Every move counted, every decision mattered. Together, they were unstoppable. Strength and intelligence fused into a seamless partnership. After the skirmish, the remaining mercenaries fled, realizing they had underestimated the human. Lyra stared at Ryan, her expression a mixture of shock and admiration. You fight differently, she said, almost in awe. You do not rely on strength. You think, you adapt. Ryan smiled faintly, brushing frost from his jacket. Strength alone does not win battles. Strategy does. And courage. You showed me the same today. For the first time, Lyra's tension eased. She saw that humans could be formidable, not because they were stronger, but because they could surprise, endure, and outthink their enemies. She also realized that Ryan had something her warriors did not: patience and empathy. He did not rush, did not act recklessly, yet he acted decisively when it mattered. They continued moving through the rocky hills, keeping a careful pace. Ryan knew the mercenaries would regroup and continue the hunt, so they needed to reach a safer location. Along the way, he taught Lyra small human survival techniques: how to find hidden water sources beneath the ice, how to recognize unstable rock formations, and how to move silently in wind and snow. She listened intently, absorbing every lesson, impressed by how humans could adapt to environments that her species considered harsh. During a brief rest, They shared a small meal of protein bars and synthetic rations. Lyra watched Ryan eat, noting how he remained calm, always thinking 2 steps ahead. She began to realize that there was more to humanity than brute force. Humans could endure, adapt, and rise to challenges that even her warriors would hesitate to face. "You have a strange way of fighting," she admitted finally, breaking the silence. "I expected you to panic, to hide. But you are fearless." Ryan shook his head. "Not fearless, just willing. I act because I must. Fear doesn't help. Courage does." Her eyes softened slightly. She had seen fear in many faces, even in her own kind. But she had never heard someone speak of it this way. To her, courage was a concept, a training exercise. But Ryan lived it. Every action he took proved it. Night fell, and the frozen landscape turned silver under the twin moons. They found shelter in a small cavern, hidden behind jagged rocks. Inside, Lyra rested while Ryan kept watch. The wind outside was relentless, but inside, the quiet allowed them to reflect. "You did not close your door to me," Lyra said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. "Most would have left me to die." Ryan glanced at her, a small smile on his lips. "I don't leave anyone to die. Not because of species or strength. Because it is right. Because it matters." She nodded, her expression unreadable, but thoughtful. In that simple act, she realized the depth of human character. Ryan had offered safety and trust when fear might have been wiser. That choice, small as it seemed, carried enormous weight. The hours passed slowly, the sound of wind and distant avalanches echoing through the cavern. Lyra watched Ryan silently, noting his calmness, his alertness, and the careful way he prepared for every possibility. Despite her natural caution, she began to relax, trusting him more than she had trusted any human or perhaps any being. Before sleep overtook them, Lyra spoke again, her voice steady but quiet. "Tomorrow, we must move. They will not stop searching for me. I cannot rely on hiding forever." Ryan nodded. "I know, and we will face them together. You are stronger than you think, but strength alone is not enough. We will need strategy, planning, and courage." Lyra studied him for a long moment. Then, for the first time, she smiled openly. It was brief, but genuine, a warrior recognizing another who understood the true meaning of survival. As they drifted into sleep, the bond between them strengthened. It was a bond forged not in comfort, but in shared danger and mutual respect. Lyra realized that humans could be unpredictable, yes, but also brilliant, clever, and courageous in ways her people had not anticipated. Ryan understood that allies could come from the unlikeliest places, and sometimes the most dangerous being could also be the most loyal. Outside the cavern, the wind continued to howl. The planet remained hostile, unforgiving, and full of danger. But inside, in the small warmth of their temporary refuge, two beings from entirely different worlds had begun to trust each other, each learning from the other, each preparing for the challenges ahead. Tomorrow, they would face more threats, but tonight they survived. And that survival born of courage, intelligence, and trust was a small victory that hinted at something greater. The possibility that humans, even on the edge of the galaxy, could rise to challenges that seemed impossible, not just with strength, but with heart. The morning sun barely pierced the icy fog that clung to the rocky hills. Ryan and Lyra packed their supplies in silence, each step careful, measured. The events of the previous day had changed them both. Ryan had learned that Lyra's strength and skill were extraordinary, but her cautious trust had made him realize that humans were not the only ones capable of endurance. Lyra, in turn, had begun to respect Ryan's intelligence, patience, and courage, qualities that were rare in any being, especially humans. "We need to move south," Ryan said, pointing toward a ridge that would give them higher ground and better visibility. "The mercenaries might track us from the canyon. From there, we can see them coming." Lyra nodded, adjusting the strap of her blade. "Lead the way. I will follow your plan." Her words surprised him. Most of her kind would have resisted direction, trusting only themselves. Yet here she was, acknowledging his judgment. Ryan felt a small flicker of pride. But he did not let it distract him. Survival required focus, and danger was never far away. As they moved, the terrain became steeper and more treacherous. Loose rocks and patches of ice made every step risky. Ryan led carefully, testing each foothold before committing his weight. Lyra followed closely, moving with a grace and precision that made her almost silent. He marveled at her agility. Even on unstable ground, she never faltered. He realized that her people's training was not just physical, but mental, every movement calculated, every instinct honed. They reached the ridge by mid-morning. From this height, the landscape stretched out like a frozen battlefield. Ryan scanned the area with his portable sensors. There, moving slowly through the mist, were signs of pursuit, faint heat signatures, distant movement, and tracks in the frost. "They're still following us," Ryan said quietly, his eyes narrowing. "We need a strategy, and we need to act fast." Lyra's eyes gleamed with determination. "Let them come. I am ready." Ryan shook his head. "Strength alone is not enough. We need to make them underestimate us, lead them into a trap." He began arranging stones and fallen branches, setting crude tripwires and makeshift alarms. Lyra observed closely, absorbing his tactics. She realized that humans had a different kind of strength, one that combined intelligence, patience, and observation. Her people relied on brute force and speed, but Ryan used thinking and anticipation together. Their abilities complemented each other perfectly. Hours passed in tense preparation. By mid-afternoon, the traps were ready, and Ryan had positioned himself in a hidden spot overlooking the pass below. Lyra crouched beside him, her eyes scanning the distant fog. Neither spoke, but the silence was comfortable, a sign of growing trust. The first mercenary appeared just as Ryan predicted. Moving cautiously through the fog, the trap's trigger drops tumbled down, catching the intruder by surprise. Lyra struck with lightning speed, incapacitating him before he could react. The other mercenaries arrived in stages, each one underestimating the humans. Ryan's traps slowed them, and Lyra's precision strikes disabled their weapons. But then, the mercenaries regrouped. They were more numerous than Ryan had anticipated, at least 10 in total. The narrow pass meant escape was impossible if they charged together. Ryan's mind raced. He needed a plan that combined their strengths without relying on numbers. "Move to the left," he whispered to Lyra. "I'll draw them into the traps. You hit them from above." Lyra nodded. Her trust in him was absolute now. Together, they executed the plan with flawless coordination. Ryan feigned weakness, leading the first wave of attackers into a series of jagged rocks and tripwires. The sound of falls and crashes echoed through the canyon. Lyra struck from the high ground, her energy blade cutting through the enemy's defenses with unmatched precision. The battle was intense, and the fog made it even more dangerous. Ryan ducked behind rocks, narrowly avoiding a swinging weapon. Lyra moved like a shadow, fast and silent, her attacks decisive. Each time Ryan's plan predicted their movements, Lyra was there to finish it. Each time Lyra's skill opened a path, Ryan was ready to exploit it. Finally, the last mercenary stumbled into a trap, disarmed and trapped under a fallen boulder. The canyon fell silent except for their heavy breathing and the distant howl of the wind. Ryan and Lyra exchanged a glance, a mixture of exhaustion and relief. "You are remarkable," Lyra said softly, lowering her blade. "I did not think a human could fight like this." Ryan shook his head, wiping frost from his brow. "Not human, just willing, courage and thinking." "That's enough." Lyra studied him in silence for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. It was genuine, warm, and fleeting, a rare expression for someone of her kind. "You are different," she said. "Most humans would hide, or run, or surrender. You act." Ryan felt a surge of respect for her in return. "And you fight with skill and honor. Most of your kind would have ignored me, or worse." Their words hung in the cold air, a quiet acknowledgement of mutual respect. In that moment, they were no longer just allies forced together by circumstance. They were a team, bound by trust, courage, and the understanding that each had something the other lacked. As night approached, they moved toward a safer area, a small plateau surrounded by steep cliffs that would provide natural protection. Ryan built a small signal flare to warn them. If anyone approached, Lyra kept watch, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon. She had never relied on another being so fully, yet here she was, trusting a human with her life. Around a small fire, they shared a sparse meal. The warmth of the flames contrasted with the icy wind. Outside, Lyra observed Ryan as he ate, noting his careful, methodical approach. He did not rush, did not waste energy, yet he remained alert. Every action had a purpose, and that purpose kept them alive. "You trust me," Ryan said quietly, breaking the silence. Lyra's gaze met his, steady and unwavering. "I trust your mind, your judgment. You saved me when most would have turned away." Ryan nodded. "And I trust your strength. You saved me too, in ways you do not realize." Their conversation was interrupted by a distant roar, a sound that made both of them tense instantly. From the mist emerged a massive creature native to the planet, drawn to the commotion of the battle. It was enormous, with thick, armored scales and glowing eyes that pierced the fog. It moved quickly, powerful, and relentless, its presence a new threat neither had anticipated. Ryan's mind raced. "We need to work together. I'll lure it, you hit it from above. We can't fight it head-on." Lyra nodded, her grip tightening on her blade. She moved silently to the high ground, her eyes fixed on the creature. Ryan ran toward the plateau edge, drawing its attention. The creature charged, faster than expected, its massive claws tearing through the frozen ground. Ryan dodged, weaving between rocks, using the terrain to slow its momentum from above. Lyra struck with precision, hitting the creature at its vulnerable points. It roared in pain but did not stop. Ryan led it toward a narrow gorge, where the cliffs would trap it. Lyra's attacks weakened it further, and together, they managed to force the creature into the gorge. With one final coordinated strike, they caused a rock slide that blocked the passage, trapping the beast. Both collapsed to the ground, breathing heavily, exhausted but victorious. They looked at each other and smiled, a silent acknowledgement of their teamwork and trust. "You are human," Lyra said quietly, almost in awe. "Not just strong, but clever, brave, and unafraid." Ryan smiled faintly. "And you are not just dangerous. You are skilled, intelligent, and loyal. We make a good team." For the first time, Lyra allowed herself to relax completely. She had faced countless threats in her life, yet nothing had prepared her for the combination of human ingenuity and courage she had witnessed in Ryan. He had not only saved her life, but he had also earned her respect and trust, a rare gift for anyone in her world. As night fell, they sat by their small fire, the stars reflecting off the icy ground. The wind howled outside, but inside their small circle of warmth, there was peace, temporary but precious. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more dangers, but tonight they had survived together. In the quiet of the night, Lyra finally spoke words she had not dared before. "I will follow your lead, not because I must, but because I trust you." Ryan nodded. "And I will keep you safe, not because I have to, but because it is right." The bond between them, forged in danger, respect, and shared survival, had grown stronger. Two beings from entirely different worlds, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, had learned to rely on each other. And in doing so, they had discovered something rare, the true power of courage, trust, and partnership. Outside, the icy world remained hostile, but inside, two unlikely allies had found a moment of calm, and in that calm, the spark of something greater was beginning to grow. The morning sun barely warmed the frozen plateau as Ryan and Lyra prepared to move again. The events of the previous days weighed heavily on both of them. The mercenaries were still out there, and Lyra's people might send more forces to reclaim her. The icy winds whipped against their faces, reminding them that this planet was unforgiving. Yet, they had survived together, and that survival had forged a bond neither of them could ignore. Ryan checked the path ahead, scanning the terrain carefully. "We need to reach the neutral colony," he said. "It's safe there, and they can hide you until we figure out the next move." Lyra's eyes followed the ridge line. "I have never relied on anyone like this before, she admitted. I always depended on my skill, my speed, my instincts. But now, I trust you. Ryan glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. And I trust you. Not just your strength, but your mind. We make a good team. For the first few hours, they moved in silence, their footsteps careful and measured. Ryan led the way, using every trick he knew to avoid detection. Lyra followed closely, alert and ready to strike at a moment's notice. They crossed frozen rivers, jagged rocks, and narrow paths that tested their balance and courage. Every step reminded them of the dangers that lurked nearby, and yet, the trust they had built kept them focused and determined. By mid-afternoon, the mist of the canyon lifted, revealing a valley below. The neutral colony lay nestled within, a cluster of structures built for shelter and defense. Ryan's sensors confirmed no immediate threats, but he knew they could not relax yet. Almost there, he whispered. Stay close, stay alert. As they descended, a sudden shout echoed from the tree line. Mercenaries, they had tracked them again. Ryan's heart raced, but he did not panic. He motioned for Lyra to follow him to a narrow pass. We used the terrain. Remember the traps we set before? We can do it again. Lyra's eyes glimmered with determination. Lead the way. The mercenaries approached cautiously, wary after their previous defeats. Ryan and Lyra split briefly, using their knowledge of the terrain to separate the attackers. Rocks tumbled, branches snapped, and carefully positioned traps delayed the mercenaries' advance. Lyra struck with precision from the high ground, while Ryan used quick improvisations to disable the rest. But then the situation shifted. A larger force arrived, led by a heavily armored alien commander. His presence was imposing, and his strategy far more advanced than the previous attackers. Ryan and Lyra were outnumbered and had limited space to maneuver. They had to rely not just on strength and speed, but on every ounce of intelligence, courage, and teamwork they had cultivated. Follow my lead, Ryan whispered. We draw them into the canyon, where their numbers won't help. Use your speed, your precision, and I'll control the environment. Lyra nodded, trusting him completely. Together, they moved as one, their actions perfectly synchronized. Ryan led the commander's forces into a narrow corridor of rocks. Lyra struck from above, her attacks swift and accurate, targeting weak points in their armor. Ryan used improvised weapons, shifting rocks and creating obstacles that slowed their advance. The battle raged. But Ryan's careful planning and Lyra's extraordinary skill turned the tide. One by one, the mercenaries fell into traps or were disarmed, while the commander found himself isolated. Ryan feigned vulnerability, drawing the commander forward, while Lyra struck with a calculated precision that left him stunned and off balance. Finally, they forced the commander to retreat with the remaining mercenaries. The canyon fell silent, except for the echoes of the battle and the howling wind. Ryan and Lyra stood together, exhausted but victorious. You fought well, Ryan said, his breath coming in heavy bursts. We survived because we trusted each other. Lyra nodded, her expression softened. I did not expect to rely on anyone like this, yet I would follow you anywhere now. The gravity of their bond settled between them, unspoken but undeniable. They had faced danger together, relied on each other, and survived where others would have failed. Their differences, species, upbringing, culture no longer mattered. What mattered was courage, intelligence, and trust. As dusk approached, they finally reached the outskirts of the neutral colony. Guards spotted them and quickly recognized Lyra as a being in need of protection. Ryan explained the situation, and the colony leaders agreed to provide refuge. For the first time in days, Lyra could rest without fear of immediate attack. Inside the safe walls of the colony, Ryan and Lyra shared a meal in a quiet room. The tension of the past days slowly melted away. Lyra observed Ryan with a new respect. You did not just fight for survival. You fought for honor and for me. That is rare. Ryan shrugged. I do what is right, not because it's easy, but because it matters. Courage isn't about fearlessness, it's about acting when it counts. Lyra's gaze softened. Humans are stronger than I imagined. Not just in body, but in spirit. They spent the evening planning their next steps. The mercenaries were not defeated entirely, and Lyra's people might send more forces. Ryan suggested ways to fortify the colony, set warning systems, and prepare escape routes. Lyra contributed her knowledge of strategy and combat, refining his ideas with precision. Together, they built a plan that combined human ingenuity and alien skill. A plan that could withstand almost any threat. As night fell, they sat by a small fire, reflecting on the journey so far. "I did not expect to find trust here," Lyra said quietly. "Or friendship, perhaps." More, Ryan looked at her, understanding the unspoken meaning. "Trust is earned," he said. "But once earned, it is stronger than fear, stronger than danger, stronger than distance between worlds." Lyra nodded. "I will not forget this. Not you, not what you have shown me," Ryan smiled faintly. "And I will not forget you. Your courage, your skill, your willingness to survive and adapt. We both have learned from each other." Outside, the colony was quiet, the wind of the frozen planet still howling through the rocks. But inside, two beings from entirely different worlds had found more than survival. They had found understanding, respect, and a bond that could endure any challenge. In the coming days, they would face new dangers, but they would face them together. Ryan had never closed his door to peril, and now he had shown that courage, trust, and humanity could bridge even the greatest gaps. Lyra had never relied on anyone before, but now she had learned that survival was not just about strength. It was about working together, trusting, and fighting with both heart and mind. As they prepared to rest, Ryan looked at the horizon. "Tomorrow will bring challenges, but whatever comes, we face it together." Lyra nodded, a quiet smile on her face. "Together," she echoed. The twin moons rose over the icy cliffs, casting their light over the plateau. The wind howled, the planet remained hostile, but inside the walls of the colony, two unlikely allies had found refuge, safety, and a future built on courage, trust, and mutual respect. Their journey was far from over, but one truth was clear: humans, even in the edge of the galaxy, could rise to meet any danger, not just with strength, but with intelligence, heart, and unwavering courage. And in that quiet moment, Ryan and Lyra understood that their bond was not just a matter of survival. It was a testament to the power of trust, the strength of partnership, and the resilience of life itself. To different worlds, to unlikely allies, standing together against the galaxy, proving that courage and trust could overcome even the greatest dangers. The story of their survival, their bravery, and their bond would echo far beyond this frozen planet, a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, humanity and its courage could shine brighter than any star.